Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Stu is here. Good to see you, Stu. Peter Henderson is on as well. Great to see you too, Peter. Colin is here. Van Nackenizer is on as well. We have Raven 1983 Witch. Hope you're well. I hope we're able to sort out your Discord. Still having problems with Discord. Wish I was more tech savvy. I spoke to administrators and we're not sure exactly what's the problem. We'll try and fix that for you. Joe Cake and King Muffin are back on again. Great to see both of you. Ava, great to see you too. Hope you're well. I'm having problems with Discord too. Oh no. We'll try and sort that out. Let's see. Killer, thanks for moderating. Killer is going to try and reach out to both of you about that. Freddie B is here. Great to see you, Freddie. Hope you're well. Amax C is on too. Akismad is here. Great to see you, Akismad. We have Roshin. Great to see you, Roshin. Hope you're well. RT Bus is here. Great to see you. Norflinger is on. We have John O'Sullivan. Great to see you. We also have Alistair, great to see you, Alistair. Ashadash, great to see you. Hope you're well. Cthulhu is here. Hope you're well too. Katie is on. Great to see you, Katie. Liam. Who else have we got? I hope I didn't miss anyone. Young Ralph is on. Great to see you, Young Ralph. Barry, Herbie, CGM, great to see you. And so many more. Can't say hello to everyone, obviously we'll be here all night. But a big hello to everyone who's come on and everyone who has been on since it went live. Hope you're all very well. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you got to see the Sunday roast and enjoyed that. Big news of today, of course, is Donald Trump's arrest. He has just left the courtroom about half an hour ago, I believe. And we'll touch a bit on that, of course, with some Brexit stories and some raw sewage, not to be confused with Donald Trump. His is a bit more orange coloured. I just want to cover so a bit of a summary here on Donald Trump, and then we'll have a look at some reactions. Trump under arrest in New York. What we know so far, Trump's arraignment is scheduled for. So it was scheduled for 2:15 Eastern Time at the Manhattan Criminal Court. New York authorities will process Trump's arrest. They're expected to fingerprint the former president. Trump is scheduled to deliver remarks at his Mar-a-Lago resort at 8:15 tonight Eastern Time. I think you add another 4 or 5 hours to that. No electronic devices will be allowed in the courtroom. The judge overseeing the case is New York Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan. Issued a ruling late last night that only a handful of still photographers will be allowed to take photographs inside the room. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe to avoid the chaos that would ensue. Reporters lined up outside the courthouse overnight in the hopes of getting a seat in the arrangement room. Alignment room. A trial must still be months away. So this is just his pre-hearing, and this is going to go on for some time. So we're going to see Trump going back and forth probably. Let's just see some updates here. Trump leaves the courthouse without speaking to reporters. So it says here, Donald Trump has left the Manhattan Criminal Court about 2 hours after arriving there to be arrested and arraigned over charges linked to a 2016 hush money scheme. The former president once again declined to speak to reporters as he left the courthouse, ignoring shouted questions about how he pleaded in the case. Multiple outlets have reported that Trump pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. So this is Trump's reaction on his sort of version of Twitter. I think it is Truth, whatever. Or maybe this is Twitter, I don't remember.
Heading to Lower Manhattan, the courthouse seems so surreal, he says. Wow. They're going to arrest me. Can't believe this is happening in America. And then MAGA, make America great again. So Donald Trump apparently sending that out from his car on the way to the courthouse. And there are, just following up with what you were saying about Michael Cohen and so forth, there are legal experts who say that well, they're looking fairly skeptically at this indictment.
Well, again, by the way, again, no one's looked at the indictment, but everyone's talking about it. And the assumption is that because Michael Cohen testified, that we know that it's about the hush money. And so if it's about the hush money, it's about Michael Cohen. I mean, Stormy Daniels may be testifying, but Stormy Daniels, as far as I know, didn't have a discussion with Trump about the hush money. It was through lawyers. And one of those lawyers was Michael Cohen. And so at the end of the day, this case rises and falls potentially with Michael Cohen. And again, I heard one of your guests saying even the average Joe could basically come in and cross-examine him. I think he's right. I mean, by the way, you could use everything he said on every news channel before and after to show how biased he is in regards to Trump. Is that the ideal prosecution witness? No. And again, that's why we wonder what the other evidence is to support his claims.
Yeah, and we'll see that hopefully in due course. I mean, there was another someone reminded me yesterday, another Democrat in this occasion candidate, John Edwards, who was accused of violating campaign finance laws, using payments to cover up an affair. And, you know, in his case, jurors acquitted him of one charge and then couldn't make their mind up on others. So some sort of similarity being drawn there by one of Donald Trump's supporters.
Right. It is a little different in regards to what happened with John Edwards. It's interesting because one of the things that is being said is this going to open the floodgates? Keep in mind, let's imagine if the DA in the future is a Republican. Are we going to start to see Democratic former presidents, indicted and charged with crimes that one would not have expected for them to be charged with?
But okay, well, because Donald Trump broke the law in New York, so that's why he's being tried in New York. Magic, thanks so much for that super chat. Trump didn't go to the court. He was offered arrangement via Zoom while at Mar-a-Lago with marshals present. He declined. It's all theater. Yes. It's about drumming up support for himself. He was probably hoping that by going to this, his supporters would come out and riot, probably. And they didn't do that. So I don't know whether he got what he wanted. It is massive amount of theater. It's massive amount of support for him. And I think he'll probably benefit somewhat from this exercise today. And the fact that this is going to go on for some time, it's going to benefit Trump. Even if he's found guilty, this is free publicity, massive publicity. So I think it's bait. I think it's an attempt to rile up his supporters. That's why he went to the court, as you pointed out. He didn't have to do this. He could have done it by Zoom. But he's, no, let's go there with a motorcade and everything. Thanks for that. So here's the opinion of some of his supporters and detractors.
It is famously Donald Trump's favourite pastime. But just a few miles from his front door, opinions on the fairways are fiercely divided on his indictment.
What does it make you think that a former president is charged with a crime?
I love it. I want to see him handcuffed. I want to see him in an orange suit. I think he deserves everything he gets.
Sue and her girlfriends remember a time when Trump running for president was treated as a joke here. Almost a decade on, he's in the dock.
He's a crook, he's a thief. We knew that before he ever got in office. But people voted him in, and he still has followers. And I would say that even if he ran for president, there's a good chance he could still get in.
Plenty of people here would still vote for Donald Trump in 2024 if he gets the Republican nomination. Clubhouse manager and snack bar attendant Tony the Tiger Lopez came to the US from Mexico 43 years ago.
Donald Trump became the best president ever in the United States, and it is embarrassing for America to do that.
So you have this guy who came from Mexico and he's defending Trump and saying Trump is the greatest guy ever. Does he not understand that if Trump and his supporters if Trump had remained in office and his supporters got their way, this guy would have been deported as well?
Do that kind of stuff to our president.
So the fact that he's being charged with a serious crime doesn't affect the way you think about him?
I believe it's political.
Whether it's political or not, do you believe that he's guilty? That's what's important.
I may not vote for Donald Trump.
Lon voted for Trump in 2020, but might look elsewhere next time. But still, he thinks the criminal charges against him are politically motivated.
They're just looking to put some incidents out there, and if they stick, fine. If they don't, they don't have anything to lose because their names aren't being dragged through the mud.
Even as his fingerprints are being taken, Trump is collecting millions of dollars in donations from his loyal base.
So it's like a cult. The dear leader says, look, I'm a billionaire, but give me some money because I need to fight this case. And you have these idiots, and some of them are probably poor people, very poor people who are willing to, avoid paying the bills this month to make sure that the dear leader gets the financial support that he needs. It's pretty pathetic.
Polls show he is still the driving force in the Republican Party.
I have friends that, if they had him on video shooting somebody and killing somebody, they would still support him.
It's like Boris Johnson, isn't it, guys? The same people were saying this, the same thing about Boris people. This sort of cult of personality is extremely worrying. It ruins countries. It's ruining the world at the moment.
Round of golf continues. So too does the drama, division and debate, which...
He also has his supporters within the Republican Party, of course. And this is probably one of the craziest people within the Republican Party at the moment. I actually thought that she was just trolling people, but I actually think she believes this. Wait to hear what she said.
President Trump is joining some of the most incredible people in history being arrested today. Nelson Mandela was arrested, served time in prison. Jesus was arrested and...
So she's comparing Donald Trump to Jesus and Nelson Mandela.
Murdered by the Roman government. There have been many people throughout history that have been arrested and persecuted by radical, corrupt governments. And it's beginning today in New York City. And I just can't believe it's happening, but I'll always support him.
But I still have to ask the question. When the camera is not there, does she say, did you like that one, or will we do another go at it? Donald Trump is like Jesus, fighting a corrupt system, and he was crucified. I was going to say Boris Johnson. Will Donald Trump be crucified? Maybe that's what these supporters want, because if Donald Trump is eventually crucified, then he will rise from the dead after 3 days. No? Isn't that what... Maybe that's what they should be campaigning for. They should be telling Trump, you need to be like Jesus, exactly like Jesus. Get yourself crucified and then rise from the dead after 3 days. I wonder what will happen to his support base if he doesn't rise from the dead. Oh my goodness. These people are insane. Let me read some of your comments. Marjorie Tart Green. I'm allergic to that woman. Lock him up. Remember, the Trump and his Trump supporters were shouting all the time, lock her up when it came to Hillary Clinton. Jesus and Nelson Mandela says it all. poor Jesus, you know. He's like, I tried to do a good thing and now I'm getting compared to Donald friggin' Trump. What did I do to deserve that? Oh my goodness. Okay, let's move on. So this is a case that's going to go on for some time. This is a summary of some of the things happening in politics in Britain at the moment. So you have Theresa Coffey has been accused of a dereliction of duty on the day she launched the government's cleaner water plan. So the government are going to spend £1.6 billion. Actually, they're not going to spend. They're going to hand over £1.6 billion to private water companies and ask them to clean up their act. These private water companies that have been making hundreds of millions in profit are being asked, can you please do what you're supposed to do? Here's an extra 1.6 billion and hopefully you'll do what you're supposed to do. You know, wouldn't it be better just to nationalize the water companies? There's no way to stop pollution overnight, she said. She said critics who said that they could solve the problem were either detached from reality or being definitely dishonest with the public. No, nobody's claiming that it can be stopped overnight, but it needs to be stopped. But what the Tories did last year was push through legislation that allows the water companies to get away with this. So they're no longer going to be punished. David Blank, who chairs the water regulator Ofwat, has suggested that water company bosses should be linked to performances. Their pay should be linked to performance. No, I'd go a step further. If these people break the law, although maybe they're not breaking any law, but I hope what will happen when the Labour Party get into power, they will create laws. If they're not going to nationalise the water companies, which they should do, like for example in Scotland, where it's under public ownership, if they don't do that, they should bring in criminal charges against water companies. Because if you just say, okay, you'll have to pay a fine, or if your pay is linked to performance, well, that's not really a disincentive, is it? So a fine is no good if the company says, well, if the fine is £1 million, but for us we can save 2 million by cutting corners, then they'll just cut the corners and pay the fine. We can save 2 million. You know, if they can save more money by cutting corners, then they'll just pay the fine. The Science and Technology Secretary Michelle Donnellan has said that the UK will commit to joining the EU's Horizon research programme as an associate member only on the right terms. Jesus. Like the EU said, yeah, if you want to join, the door is open. And it's like, oh no, we're only going to join on the right terms. This is, you know, once again, Brexit here. Attempt to keep Brexiteers happy, I presume, because, you know, there are great terms available. Well, we want to negotiate something. Ministers are developing contingency plans for a bold alternative to the EU Horizon Europe, as it appears to be playing hardball over re-entry. Okay, but like, if Horizon Europe is the only game in town, then what's the point in having an alternative? You're not going to have the money to fund that. Keir Starmer celebrated 3 years since he was elected Labour Party leader by travelling to Burnley to see a sporting initiative to keep people out of crime. Starmer said that the public does not think the government's attempt to tackle antisocial behaviour are making any difference. No, well, you know, if you cut public services, then of course that you know is the core cause of antisocial behaviour, the lack of public services, especially for young people. Then of course the Tories are not going to deal with it. The government sometimes like to pretend that there doesn't really exist or it doesn't really impact on people, he said. Labour is 23 points ahead in the latest opinion polls by Ipsos. with 2/3 of people wanting an end to more than a decade of Conservative government at the next general election. So there are some elections in May, the local ones. They're going to be very interesting to watch, and we imagine the Tories are going to get a trashing at that. But when it comes to these opinion polls, 23-point lead, that's going to narrow as we get close to the election. And you can imagine the toxicity. It will be BNP on steroids. It will be UKIP on steroids. It's going to be extremely toxic. And they're going to be using all sort of horrible language against Keir Starmer, against the Labour Party, against Labour members, against asylum seekers, against the EU. It's going to be pulling out all the stops, and the Tories are going to go like the hammers of hell in attempts, and their friends in the media are going to pull out all sorts of horrible stories about all groups of people to try and shore up the Tory vote. I don't believe that the Labour Party will win like a 300-seat majority or anything like that. They don't need to. If they could win a 50-seat majority, that would be enough. They need to win, a comfortable majority in order to rule without any problems. It's pie in the sky, the idea that they'd win 200-seat majority or anything close to that. It would be nice to see the Conservative Party, sitting in opposition and having something like the SNP is the main opposition part. That would be amazing to watch. The leader of the opposition, Stephen Flynn, for example, that would be wonderful. And the Conservatives, rendered completely sitting, in the opposition with the DUP. That would be nice to see. Anyway, young people could be disenfranchised at the local election next month because of inadequate attempts by the government to make them aware of new voter ID rules, according to the Electoral Reform Society. For example, the Oyster card, the transport Oyster card, the over 60s is a valid form of ID, but the student one is not valid ID. Wonder why? Fearless Wolf, thanks so much for that super chat. Has anyone seen the three-eyed fish yet? That would be... Is that another name for Therese Coffee? There was a story, this clip I wanted to show you with Therese Coffee. Where is it? Yes, here we go.
The penalties that have been deployed so far, even though we are now seeing well over 100 million, the largest one, 90 million deployed recently, they've not been a sufficient deterrent for poor performance. So I'm going to make those penalties unlimited.
So we made the penalties really big, but it had no impact, so we're going to make them unlimited. Once again, this is just theatre. It's political theatre. They're not going to impose such sanctions. But even if they did, if the companies believe it's cheaper just to avoid paying, avoid doing the right thing, they'll just do that. There need to be criminal charges leveled at the CEO or the directors of these companies. That's how you get them to change their ways. Anyone on Twitter would notice that there's this guy. It's something to do with Elon Musk. I don't know what it's exactly about. Something about Digicoin or something that he's in trouble with. I really don't understand. Anyway, not that important. Thanks for that, Fearless Wolf. Moving on. There was... My God, this is a story. Home Office to announce barge as accommodation for asylum seekers. So this is, and there were pictures on Twitter. I don't actually have them here, but the Home Office is poised to reveal a barge as its first offshore accommodation for asylum seekers, The Guardian understands. The Bibi Stockholm has been used all over Europe to accommodate asylum seekers, according to sources close to Barbados Maritime Ship Registry, which oversees the use of the vessel. It currently has a gym, a well-furnished bar, and more than 220 ensuite bedrooms over 3 decks. The vessel, operated by Liverpool company Billy Marine, was previously used by the Netherlands to house about 500 asylum seekers in the early 2000s. Last week, the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab said nothing is off the table when it came to reducing the use of hotels to house asylum seekers, insisting that they had served as an incentive for small boat crossings. Of course, they don't serve as an incentive. It's not, okay, let's get to Britain because they'll put us up in a hotel. People seeking asylum want to get to Britain because they have connections in Britain. They speak the language. They have friends or family living in the UK. They're rejoining family, for example. It's not because of the hotel accommodation. The idea that you can get on a legal boat, yes, run by a gangster to get into this country to be housed in a hotel, that's going to end. Raab said, as the government, so you have this weird sort of narrative that the Tories have in the House of Commons. They say the British people are open and welcoming. We have a long history of welcoming refugees. And then he turns around and says, yeah, but we need to discourage them from coming here. So we're going to tell them, we're going to put you on a bloody barge. That doesn't sound very welcoming, does it? Rob said, as the government prepared to announce plans to house asylum seekers on barges, other vessels, and in military bases. Many Conservative MPs have criticised the government's plans to house asylum seekers on barges. The former Business Secretary Jackie Doyle-Price questioned whether such proposals could harm port-based businesses. It's not a humanitarian problem. Jackie Doyle-Price has. It's bad for businesses in the area. Wow. Okay. Don't put refugees and asylum seekers on a barge. What, were you worried about how, their living conditions? No, we're worried about other businesses in the area. People who have to work at the docks, they may see this and be, put off. Richard Drax, who sounds like a Bond villain, the MP for South Dorset, who owns something like half of Dorset. He's a massive landowner. Said the use of boats and barges was totally and utterly out of the question and would exacerbate existing problems tenfold. The MP also threatened to take legal action over the announcement, saying, "We are looking at all legal routes. We will look at any way we can stop this. Every angle is being looked at." How would it, what sort of problems is he complaining about? The Home Office spokesperson said the pressure on the asylum system has continued to grow and requires us to look at a range of accommodation options which offer better value for money for taxpayers than hotels. You know what's better value for money for taxpayers? To allow refugees to work. Allow them into regular accommodation and allow them to work. That's what most of them want to do. People want to rebuild their lives in the United Kingdom. If they could work, they would be able to contribute to society. Many of these people would be able to fill the job requirements that have the job skills, to fill where there isn't a requirement. There are doctors, there are engineers, there are fruit pickers, there are people who can work in hospitality. And they want to work, they want to rebuild their lives, they want to contribute. They don't want to be sitting in a hotel on welfare or on some sort of benefits. Of course, they don't get the benefits that people born in the UK get. but they get very little money. But whatever money they do get, you have the right wing complaining about it. Well, allow them to work. West Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, last week dismissed the plans as government spin, as ministers have not said they would use barges instead of hotels, but said in time there would be hotels overflowing with people and barges overflowing with people until the government speeds up processing claims. They need to deal with the backlog, and in order to deal with the backlog, they need more staff and they need more resources. But for some reason, the Tories don't want to spend the money on doing that. This is the thing, is where they don't like spending public money to deal with a problem. They would prefer just to outsource it to the private sector and give the private sector the money. But you can't do that at the Home Office. You need government officials processing these claims. I'm surprised they haven't outsourced it to private companies. But maybe they don't want to process all these claims because then they can use it as a political tool. It follows a number of reports highlighting government plans to house asylum seekers on giant barges that are normally used for offshore construction projects, after The Guardian revealed that the officials were also considering the use of disused cruise ships. Disused cruise ships and rundown army barracks, this is going to create chaos. But it's just sort of out of sight, out of mind, because the Tory MPs in the area are like, we're under pressure over these hotels. Get these people out of here. Move them to somewhere else. Not in my backyard sort of mentality. William Ragg, the MP for Hazel Grove, suggested the government was pursuing something must be done, something must be seen to be done policy by suggesting migrants could be housed on boats, and invoked 1990s children television program as he lambasted the Rosie and Jim idea of barges all over the place. Okay, I remember that show. Amnesty International's UK Steve Valdez-Simmons said that the huge and expensive backlog in asylum claims, which he blamed on the government, was no excuse for failing to treat people properly. People who have escaped terror and torture, endured criminal exploitation and traumatic journeys should be treated with basic human dignity, not corralled in on barges and or other grossly inadequate and isolated accommodation. These are people who need professional treatment. They need professional help. Many people are suffering from PTSD and other conditions, and they need to be treated with respect, basically. And just hoarding people onto a barge is not going to achieve that. But as I said, it's a sort of out of sight, out of mind approach. And it ticks two boxes. It gets the refugees and asylum seekers out of sight, out of mind, but it also treats them like the way the UKIPers or the BNP people within the Conservative Party and who vote for the Conservative Party want these people treated. They want to see them treated in a bad way. I'm honestly convinced there are people who, get somewhat excited by the idea of asylum seekers, filling up a cruise ship and living in filth. They actually like that idea. It gives them some sort of weird pleasure. The government has also faced resistance from senior Tory MPs over plans to use military sites to house asylum seekers. And this is a sort of, I believe, Nigel Farage tail wagging the dog approach, where you have you have this story, and I believe that there's somebody within the government who's leaking a lot of stuff to maybe GB News, or maybe I'm putting on a bit of a tinfoil hat here, but I get this impression. You see a lot of what's very strange, and let me explain this. What's very strange is you'd see Nigel Farage doing something, going down to the port and with his Fisher-Price binoculars and filming people coming in. And it's not a big story at the time. And then it becomes a big story. All the news outlets are talking about it. after Nigel Farage has started talking about this issue. And then the government respond to it. It gives me the impression that there's somebody within the government who's telling Nigel Farage or telling GB News or something, this is a policy we would like to push. How about you run a story on it and see how the public respond? See if you get some traction. And then we will respond to your anger over it. This is the impression I get. And once again, maybe I'm just wearing a tinfoil hat. Maybe it's just a conspiracy. But I get this. We see it all the time. In particular, when it came to the military bases, Nigel Farage was out there immediately saying, you know, if they're going to put people in military bases, this is going to be, these places are sacrosanct. They're holy ground because of, you know, it used to be an RAF base, and remember the war and remember our Blitz spirit, and remember, you know, these places should be museums. They shouldn't be places to put asylum seekers. And then you had MPs putting pressure on the government not to house asylum seekers in these military bases. It all seems very, very strange how Nigel Farage is so far ahead of the curve. But I don't know. Just speculation. So it says the government has faced resistance from senior MPs over the use of military sites to house asylum seekers. The former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, questioned plans for the former RAF base in Braintree, constituency of James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, which neighbours her own. The proposals came after the Home Office admitted nearly 400 hotels across the country were being used to accommodate more than 51,000 people at a reported cost of more than £6 million a day. So you have the right wing and you have the GB News people who complain about this £6 million a day. But wouldn't it be better to spend that money on processing claims? And then, as most of the people turn out to be valid, you know, their claims are valid, they could be contributing to society. They could be doing the jobs that are empty at the moment, that are being unfilled. You know, a lot of people would be, who are sitting in these hotels waiting for their claim to be processed, would like to be working in a hospital, in the NHS. They would like to be working in a restaurant, making some money so they can build their life. It doesn't make any sense. Max isn't talking about Carol Voderman enough today. Sad face. She's a hero of mine. Actually, before we move on, well, sticking with this subject, but I want to show you a funny video before we move on to the next story. Hope you enjoyed this. This was that's not a typical funny moment, funny break, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it anyway.
In these queues at Dover, I haven't seen queues like that since the Queen died or Greg started selling vegan sausage rolls. It's unbelievable. An obnoxious, pathetic excuse of a Home Secretary has blamed everything except Brexit. Everything. Blame the workers, blame the French, blame the war in Ukraine, blame the trans people, blame the immigrants, blame the tofu-eating wokerati. Fuck it, why don't you just blame it on the boogie and then moonwalk directly into the sea? You disingenuous, fact-avoiding slurry truck of a woman. Oh, we didn't vote for this. Well, you did actually. This is exactly what you voted for. You voted to get your passport stamped, which is what's causing big delays. You voted to be treated like third-party nationals, which is why things aren't as easy as they used to be. This is exactly what you voted for. If Europe was a party, the UK is the person who's chosen to go and stand in the front garden in the piss and rain, peering through the window while we repeatedly punch ourselves in the bollocks. Ridiculous. It's poetic, actually. Because what could be more British than an unnecessary queue to get to a continent you voted to leave because you can't holiday in your own country because everything's too expensive and our rivers and beaches are being filled with shite. Anyway, I'm off to the tip.
I love this guy. I just discovered him recently, and I want to visit Liverpool because I think Liverpoolians are amazing. Graham Hughes, and he sounded like Graham Hughes, so I imagine they're probably from the same area. But he's wonderful. A lot of Irish there as well. So Anyway, moving on, but sticking with immigration and asylum seekers. Suella Braverman won't say Rwanda deportation flights will start by summer. So this is from a few days ago. Suella Braverman has been unable to confirm that the first promised deportation flights to Rwanda will take off this summer as the controversial policy continues to face scrutiny in the courts. So once again, we've given loads of money to Rwanda. She went over there, on taxpayers' expense, to do a bit of a tour, to have a bit of a laugh with the people there. And, it doesn't seem to be really getting off the ground, no pun intended. The Home Secretary, whose officials briefed the plans were on track during her trip to the African country last month, played down the prospect of the flights going ahead shortly. We are making very steady progress, she told Sky's Sophie Ridge on Sunday. I'm not going to give a deadline as to when the flights will take off. So she's probably hoping that this will sort of die down for a bit, and then if they're able to eventually send somebody, they'll be like, yeah, see, my dream has come true. There remains some legal obstacles to the government's implementation of its deal to detain and swiftly remove all people arriving by irregular means, which challenges go through the courts. However, the Home Office source had told reporters that we are certainly working towards getting the flights off before the summer. Several news organizations interpret that as a pledge to remove people under the scheme. Braverman, who's also unable to say when the government's plan to stop the boats bringing people across the channel will be delivered. It's like these slogans as promises are a pile of crap, and they knew that they can't achieve these things. But it's once again a distractor before an election. The local elections are coming up, so stop the boats, cut inflation, things like this. Unfortunately, it seems to work on some people. I don't know why, but it does seem to work on them. I'm not going to put a date on it, but the rules are clear. If they arrive here illegally, you'll be detained. The Shadow Levelling Up Secretary Lisa Nandy said government strategies to tackle irregular immigration had failed and added millions of pounds to the cost of improving the asylum system, and that Braverman should take responsibility. She complains that an asylum system is broken. I think she really does not need to ask who broke it, and the answer to that lies looking in the mirror, she told the BBC Sunday with Laura Kunsberg programme. I think that this is a con trick being perpetrated on the British people. The government is not processing claims. They've got an enormous backlog. They've added £500 million to the costs because of the delays that they're being causing by them pursuing all sorts of new strategies, barges that don't exist, claims to send people to Rwanda that haven't materialized. What we need is a government that gets a grip on the system. So I think the approach from the Labour Party is we will fix it. We will fix it by processing more claims. But the problem also for the Labour Party, as soon as these harebrained ideas are are presented to the public, some people like them, and the Labour Party are in a bit of a fix because they can't say we're not going to follow through with this Rwanda policy, because unfortunately it's popular with some people, and the Labour Party are sadly always on the lookout for more votes. So they're like, okay, well, should we support this policy or should we be against it? Because if we support it, there's the chance we can pick up a few votes there. I imagine as soon as they're in power, they will drop the policy. This is what I think Labour are going to do. They're going to appear very middle of the road, but once they're in power, they're going to drop a lot of these draconian policies, especially the ones that are very expensive and not achieving anything. So this isn't working, we're getting rid of it. And say we're going to bring in something else. She'll fly an empty plane and call it a refugee flight so she can stand on the runway and pose for the Tory graph. Yes. I wouldn't be surprised if I would not be surprised if they actually had paid actors fly in the plane. I wouldn't be surprised. Or there would be, Tory party supporters or something like that would fly along with her and pretend to be on their way to Rwanda. Yeah, or it could be just an empty plane. Although it'd be difficult because they would have to say how many people were on the plane. So you'd say, a lot, including the pilots. Yeah, a lot. Anyway, moving on. There was another story. Yes. Number 10 concedes that post-Brexit checks played a role in traffic chaos at Dover. So this is... thanks for that, Magic. Thanks for that super chat. Offer cost a 10,000 and he'll do it. Well, is that an hour or a day? I don't remember. Am I still stuck on this fucking island? So... This is from yesterday. What they do is they deny, and then when they can't deny anymore, they go, yeah, okay. But when the problem has been taken off the front pages. So Downing Street has conceded that the new processes brought in after the Brexit played a role in days of chaotic travel queues at Dover. One day after Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, was accused of denying it was a factor. Asked whether the UK's departure from the EU had been part of the reason for waiting times going up to 10 hours for coaches being allowed onto the Channel ferries, Rishi Sunak's official spokesperson said that delays were due to a combination of factors including poor weather and high volume of traffic. Question on what role, if any, Brexit had played, the spokesperson noted French officials now manually inspect and stamp every passport as they left the UK, which requires time. Obviously, we recognise that with the new processes in place, he said that's why authorities were given a long time to prepare for the new checks, including during the transition period, of course, which is not true. And we were in a discussion with the French counterparts about how we could further improve the flows of traffic. So when they say about during the transition period, they were saying that there would be no delays. And then right up to the end of the transition period, then they said, yes, there will be some delays for businesses. But they never said that there would be delays. As far as I remember, they didn't say anything about delays. Or if there were, there'd be some minor delays, yes. But it's no reason to be angry over Brexit. He added, we believe that we have put in places to mitigate any of the challenges that may crop up. That's giving authorities extra time to prepare and working with our French counterparts to increase our ability to move traffic and passengers more freely. The problem is that the French had asked the UK to expand the facility at the port of Dover, and the UK government said no. You can only process a number of, you can only fit a number of staff there. The French said we want to put in more staff, and the UK government said, but that'll cost money, so we're not going to spend the money. It's a typical Tory response is, well, we're not going to invest money to help people. We'll invest money to help our friends. That's what it's about. What about the £1 billion? Was it £200 million that the port had spent on checks? And then Jacob Rees-Mogg came out after and said, we're actually not going to carry out the checks because if we carry out checks on goods coming in, it'll be a problem. Taking back control is actually a problem. So we're actually not going to carry out the checks, even though the ports upgraded their infrastructure and spent 200 million, I think it was 250 or 200 million pounds. Someone misread the stop the boats now. Yes. It was, no, we're meant to stop the boats coming in, not going out. Damn. Well said, Brad. Thanks for that, Brad. It's utter nonsense regarding the weather, etc. I regularly cross the UK to Netherlands. The checks I've had are exactly the same. just less volume to do. What were they? They blame the weather all the time. Of course, the weather can be an issue with the ships, but what they do is they look for any excuse, and then they'll eventually get to Brexit. But you notice here the timing is really important. This was reported on Monday at 2 p.m. When on Sunday night the chaos had pretty much ended. The queue had been pretty much cleared, or was being cleared. So that we had moved on from the story, and that's when Number 10 says, yeah, okay, we admit that Brexit was a problem. Of course, they knew it was a problem, but they would only admit it when they believed it was politically expedient to do so. When the public had moved on from this story. This was a big story on Saturday, on Sunday, and then on Monday it was over, and that's when they said, yeah, okay, now we can admit that Brexit was the problem, or part of the problem. And you're going to see this all the time. Whatever the issue is, if they're pushed hard enough, they will admit, yes, we caused the problem, but only when it's the story has passed, only when it's no longer on the front page. Thanks, Brad and Richard. Here's another Brexit story. Sweden has expelled 1,100 British nationals since Brexit. And look, one thing is about the British government dealing with immigration. Another is EU countries. And I don't want to see anyone expelled, anyone removed, because many British people have made their home in the European Union. And I think if whatever the nationality people are, it's indifferent to me. If people have roots in a country, they've built their life there, they should be able to stay there. And sadly, because of Brexit, it's harming people in Britain, and it's harming British people. It's harming Europeans in Britain, and it's harming British people in Europe. Sweden has expelled 1,100 British nationals since Brexit, more than any other country in the EU, according to official statistics released by the European Commission. The figures come as a controversy builds over the deeply shocking decision by the country's immigration authorities to order a 74-year-old British woman with Alzheimer's to leave the country because she did not have the post-Brexit residency papers. This is really sad, and I think in her case there should be a special case made, and she should be allowed to stay. In the same way that if somebody who's in Britain, they're in a desperate situation and they haven't filled out the paperwork correctly, there should be a special case made for them on humanitarian grounds. Somebody couldn't be bothered, that's a different story. But on humanitarian grounds, this woman should be allowed to stay. Border is working exactly as it was meant to. Yes, in the port of Dover, it was working exactly as it meant to. The Brexiteers wanted to take back control. They wanted passports checked. Well, that's exactly what you're getting. Thanks for that, Richard. Full year figures released on the 31st of March. Eurostat put the Scandinavian country top of the post-Brexit removal charts with disproportionately high expulsions compared with other populous countries such as France and Germany, which had issued removal orders for 115 and 40 British citizens respectively since Brexit came into force. Spain, Italy, Portugal, Slovakia, Slovenia and Luxembourg did not expel any British nationals in 2021 and 2022. After Sweden, the Netherlands was responsible for the second highest number of removals, 720, followed by Malta 135 and France 115. Probably because they're very strict. They're very strict when it comes to the paperwork, which is, as I said, on humanitarian grounds there should be exceptions made. In total, the EU removed 2,610 British nationals in 2021-2022, which with the number of children involved suggested many families were asked to leave All other EU member states removed fewer than 100 British nationals in the same period. David Milstead, a British professor of physics living in Sweden, who is part of the British in Sweden campaign group, said the figures were alarming. He has called on the immigration authorities to immediately stop the deportation of Kathleen Poole, whose family are fighting against her removal. They also need to provide an explanation for why Sweden has issued around 50% of all deportation notices in the Schengen zone to Brits during the 2021-2022, and likely related to this, why Sweden has rejected more residence applications than any other EU countries for withdrawal agreement protections. There has been growing and obvious problem. No more looking the other way. The case of Mrs. Poole is not unique. A number of long-standing residents have been forced to leave. He also called on Sweden to review how it's treating late applications for post-Brexit residency by British citizens. Sweden's outreach programme for UK nationals was extremely weak, and around 900 late applications have been so far received. It's not too late to help those whose applications are undecided or who are appealing to keep their residency, he said. Under the withdrawal agreement signed by the UK and the EU, all EU nationals living lawfully in the UK and British citizens living in the EU or the European Economic Area country before Brexit were entitled to stay in those countries for the remainder of their lives. But it seems the Swedish government isn't. I don't know if they're respecting this, because if this woman had put in a claim, then it should be respected. But it's sad. It's sad, once again, ordinary people are suffering the consequences of Brexit, be them on one side of the border or the other. It's the French that made Sweden do it. Yes, blame the French. the easy outlet for Brexiteers. And I'm sure Brexiteers would be complaining about this, but they'd be very happy to see asylum seekers kicked out of Britain. But they said, no, we shouldn't do it to Brits. Look, if people have not respected the rules, then they have to face the consequences. But there have to be cases. It has to be a case by case basis, and there has to be a humanitarian aspect of it as well. Move on to the Tories. I just wanted to cover this.
The problem is
on the issue of political correctness in the police force. So Rishi Sunak says political correctness won't stop grooming gangs crackdown. So what the Tories have been trying to suggest is that the police have been refusing to crack down on grooming gangs because of political correctness, because of the background of these people, which is, of course, it has been rejected by organizations that work with victims.
More prevalent in our communities than people have been comfortable acknowledging.
It's not just what's happening to vulnerable children, but by whom. That's the focus for the Prime Minister today. Visiting an NSPCC hub in Leeds, he unveiled plans for specialist officers to help police forces with investigations into child sexual exploitation.
Where's the money for this? Do you have money for this? Do you have the staff for this? They keep talking about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but at the same time, they're cutting public services. Like they say, yeah, we're going to restore the police force. We're going to hire more police officers. But they cut the police service, and now they're only restoring it to what it was before the cuts. But the population has increased.
How old was that?
He was about 17, I think. Yeah, it was he.
Listening to the handlers who answer calls from young people needing help, Rishi Sunak wants the electorate to know his government is targeting what they call grooming gangs. They believe allowed to go undetected, victims ignored because of political correctness.
Honestly, this is the sort of language you'd hear from the BNP, the National Front, or maybe even UKIP about 10 years ago. UKIP would have been saying, even back in 2010, this is when it really kicked off. The UKIP and the BNP were saying, the police won't investigate for because they want to be politically correct. They don't want to identify the ethnic background of the individuals involved. And now the government is parroting this line, are presenting policies based on rhetoric you hear from the BNP.
With the specific issue of grooming gangs, we've had several independent inquiries look at the incidents here in Rochdale, but in Rotherham and Telford. And what's clear is that when victims and other whistleblowers came forward, their claims were often ignored by social workers, local politicians, or even the police. And the reason that they were ignored were due to cultural sensitivity and political correctness.
There is no evidence to support that. And he's saying that reports have said that. What reports? Can we see these reports? Can we see these inquiries? Because in many cases, these cases were not followed up. These incidents were not followed up because the police don't have the resources to do so. Social services are overloaded and they don't have the resources to follow up. Can you imagine somebody, you have a caseworker who is a social worker who's working full time, and they have seen their services cut back, so they have a bigger workload. And then whatever work that does come in, some issue, for example, a case like this is brought in, they have to then say, okay, well, I have to prioritize. Do I follow this or do I follow the one that I'm currently doing? Or should I wait until I finish this case and then move on to that? There's a disconnect from the reality of austerity. Austerity is the driving force here. Austerity cut public services, cut policing, all of these things. And these are the consequences of that. And instead of actually admitting, yes, actually we've cut public services, we need to restore that. No, we just bring out a new idea. Let's blame something else. Let's blame the culture, the PC culture here. Because it's convenient. Instead of actually looking at the reality of funding cuts. You see it all over the world. Wherever you see funding cuts, you see the consequences a few years later.
Cultural sensitivities played a part. Rotherham is a painful reminder of wider scale failures. A 2015 report showed misogyny and sexism was central to why girls as young as 11 who were raped, beaten, sometimes doused in petrol were failed by the police and the council. Girls like Elizabeth, whose abuse started at 14, she was kept inside for 10 weeks. Her perpetrator jailed for 9 years.
We were seen as low class prostitutes, having Asian boyfriends as fashion accessories, bad behavioural problems. So it was everything but what were actually happening.
They weren't even thinking of you as vulnerable?
No, nothing. In my files, I was everything but vulnerable.
The police need reform. And in order to reform, to undo this, they need resources, they need training. That costs money. Are there bad people in the police force? Of course there are. They need to be rooted out. They need to be vetted. They shouldn't be allowed in the first place if they're not taking crimes like this seriously. But how much of this is down to them not taking it seriously and them not having the resources to deal with it? Kevin, thanks so much for that super chat. Hey Max, what's your opinion on the UK setting a June 2025 deadline for most of their major banks to have their clearing done in the EU, which will be a multi-trillion-dollar hit to the City of London? I didn't know it was 2025 as a deadline. I knew that they wanted to have the clearing done as soon as possible. So this is pretty much the last foothold the UK has in Europe, in European banking, as far as I know. This is the big thing. If clearing is removed from Britain, it's going to be a massive loss for the City of London. So this is where, as far as I know, where money is transferred, when money is exchanged. It's the if you're exchanging dollars, or if I think it's about payments. I'm not sure. There are people who know it better than I do, but I do know that the removal of clearing is going to be a big problem for the City of London. It's the reason why businesses around the world are still using the City of London, mainly because of clearing and banks, financial institutions. But it makes sense for the EU to have it in the EU, because you can't have, euro clearing in another country. Doesn't make any sense. So I definitely think and we're seeing more and more operations being moved out of London into cities like Milan, Frankfurt in particular, and Paris. And it's going to continue, but the clearing is the big one. If the EU can move all the clearing out of London, then it's going to render the City of London a much smaller force on the world scale, on the world scene, on the world stage. But you said here 2025. That's certainly something that would put pressure on the financial institutions to speed up, because it's not a long time away. It doesn't give them a lot of time to get their house in order. Thanks for that. Sorry I'm not able to answer it better. I'm not an expert on it, but I do know it is the big thing that's worrying what's her name? Michelle. No, not Michelle. Mairead McGuinness in Brussels, the commissioner. That's her big concern at the moment, is getting European money out, European financial services out of London.
I was anything but a victim.
She was left to pursue her abuser in the civil courts when she felt the justice system had failed her too, and welcomes tougher sentences the government have announced today.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having us first.
The new measures, supported by the National Crime Agency, will also require police to record data on the ethnicity of perpetrators, though the government have been accused of jumping to conclusions already.
We have to be honest about the fact that some of these gangs have been overwhelmingly British Pakistani males.
What do you make of the government's rhetoric when announcing this policy?
Unnecessary and dangerous. And so what the government is saying is that beware of brown men. Well, we know that if you're like to be a predator, you like to be a white man, actually, in this country. So it's giving victims a false sense of security.
How are you doing? You're right.
And it's about the culture war. It's about painting foreigners, or people who look like they're foreigners, as the bad guy. Like, the majority of perpetrators are, as he said, are white, because the majority of the population are white. And a lot of the abuse that takes place is within families, for example. So it's, as you said, Roisin, it's dog whistles. There's an election coming up. We need to find a scapegoat. We need to find someone for the public to be angry with.
In Hartlepool, meeting voters today, the Labour leader urged the government to look at the full...
Sorry, Bill Silver says, Suella Braverman, professional milk curdler. Does she do it by just being close to it, or is it she does it with her look? Can she do it through a Zoom call? You could just put your milk in front of the TV, in front of your computer monitor or your phone, and she'll curdle that milk for you.
Picture.
Ethnicity is important, and nothing should get in the way of investigating, prosecuting child sexual exploitation. But if you look at the overall figure, that is, a relatively small element of it.
Another policy announcement is another reminder that the local elections campaign is now in full swing. Party leaders using Parliament's downtime to pitch their party as the one of law and order.
The Tories trying to sell the idea that we're law and order. Yeah, we've been in charge for 13 years, and but think of us as the new kid on the block. So, sticking with Tory failures, there is, of course, what's happening in social care. Having social care workforce funding in England an insult, ministers told. Charities have criticised an announcement that funding promises for the social care workforce in England is to be halved, with one calling the move an insult. In a white paper on adult social care reform published in December 2021, ministers pledged to invest at least £500 million over the next 3 years to begin to transform the way we support the social care workforce. However, the Department of Health and Social Care said on Tuesday that the plans for the new care workforce pathway, as well as hundreds of thousands of training places, will be backed by £250 million in funding. There you have it. Yeah, we're going to spend half a billion in improving the situation in social care, and then we'll spend £250 million. Sally Warren, the director of policy at the health think tank, the King's Trust, said the plans were a dim shadow of the wide-scale reform to adult social care that this government came into office promising. This is really, really concerning because the population is getting older. I was listening to a very interesting podcast on Novara Media about housing, and they touched on how the population is getting older, and there's obviously it's getting older, but there's also a growing population of older renters. So people who don't, so there is this idea that, okay, older people will pay for their social care by selling their home. Theresa May was saying, people shouldn't be, rattling around in big houses when they're in their 70s or 80s, when they're moved into a care home. If they can't afford it, well, they need to sell their property. And there was a lot of, I think it was the dementia tax was mentioned at the time as well. So the idea, of course, the government's idea is that we're not going to properly fund social care, so what we'll do is we'll get individuals to fund their own social care. So people can sell their home, whatever money they get from that, they can pay for their own social care. But there's a big problem. Not everyone owns their own home. And this is a ticking time bomb because, as we see, it's becoming more and more difficult for numbers of generations, not just the most recent generation, but many generations, not to be able to afford their own home. So if the government's plan is, well, you'll fund your own social care by selling your home, well, what if you don't own your home? What if you rent? Nothing for the majority of carers who go unpaid. Thanks, Magic. Yes. And this is a big problem as well. Massive problem. So there isn't funding for they've cut funding for social care, and there's no extra support for carers who are unpaid. What is it? £97 a month or something like that? What was national insurance for? Yeah, what was national insurance for? That was supposed to cover social care. Well, that's because the population is getting older. It seems national insurance is not going to cut it. So the solution is, as I said, people sell your home to pay your social care. I don't own a home. Oh, okay. Well, then you're buggered. You're up shit creek without a paddle. Like, what are people supposed to do? Thanks for that, Magic. It's a growing crisis, and if you're cutting staff, that means more people will rely on relatives to do this, or family members to provide care. But those family members can't live on air. They need financial support. I'm really worried that what's going to happen is when Labour take over, they're going to inherit an absolute disaster. And they'll try and fix it. I hope they will. I believe they'll try and fix it. But what you're going to see is the right-wing media complaining about how, oh, look at all these problems now that Labour's in charge. So they're ignoring the problems that are happening at the moment in social care and the NHS. They're ignoring a lot of these problems and trying to focus people's minds on culture wars. But as soon as Labour are in power, they'll start complaining about the NHS. Oh, look at the NHS waiting list hasn't come down. It's going up. The waiting list is probably going to continue to rise in the first period of in the first part of a Labour government, because it'll take time to bring down the waiting list. It'll take time to rehire the staff you need to bring the staffing levels back up. It could take a whole parliament to do that. So Labour are going to have a lot of hell from the media during the first parliament. That's probably why they want to win a massive majority, because they're going to lose a lot of seats after that first parliament. But I imagine if they're in for 2 parliaments, they can turn things around. I hope that's the case. But what's happening in social care is a ticking time bomb, because you have cuts left, right, and centre. You have a growing older population, and you have a growing older population that are currently renting, and you have fewer and fewer people available to provide care. So relatives have to provide carers allowance, £69.70 or £2 an hour. 2p an hour. So £2 per hour. Sorry. My God, how are people? Why is caring considered a non-job? Is it this idea that, well, if you're looking after a relative, you don't need to be paid. You don't need some sort of real support. I honestly believe, thanks for that, Magic, and I honestly believe it's about just pushing more and more people into residential care, in the sense that they stay at home and they have a live-in carer who's a relative and claims some sort of allowance, and that's it. But that's not sustainable. The social care minister, Helen Whately, said the package announced on Tuesday focuses on reorganising care with the status it deserves. Care depends completely on the people who do the caring. That's over 1 million care staff working in care homes and agencies, and countless relatives, friends and volunteers acting out of the kindness of their hearts, she said. So we're not going to actually pay them well, or pay them really anything. She added that the package was focused on the better use of technology, the power of data and digital care records, and extra funding for councils, aimed at making a care system we're proud of. Lies once again, and I have this horrible feeling that the Tories are cutting everything before they leave. They know they're on the way out. Well, you might as well cut something, or sell it off to the private sector, or reduce the situation, reduce the support for ordinary people to a level where it's at breaking point, and then hand this dog's dinner, for a better choice of words, to the Labour Party. I think this is part of the going away present that they're planning for the Labour Party. Ramona's night, everyone. Catch you at the post stream later. Thanks, Mark. We're almost at the end of the stream anyway. I just want to cover one or two more stories. This is a story that's going to potentially upset a lot of people. Critically ill patients will inevitably die due to junior doctors' strike. Critically ill patients will inevitably die because hospitals are having to cancel surgery as a direct result of next week's junior doctor strike in England, leading health experts have warned. There were bound to be fatalities among people with serious heart problems whose precarious health meant that they were a ticking time bomb and needed surgery as soon as possible. They said. They added that patients would face an even greater risk than usual of being harmed or dying if their time-sensitive operation was delayed because NHS heart units would have too few medics available during the 4-day stoppage by junior doctors to run normal operation lists. this is something that I was sort of taken aback by Keir Starmer today, who didn't seem to be supporting the junior doctor strike. And I was like, why isn't he? Like, normally the Labour Party would say, well, you know, it's better that they don't go on strike. You know, there wouldn't be any strikes if we were in charge, stuff like this. But he appeared a bit more antagonistic towards the junior doctors. And this is a very difficult issue to deal with, because if the junior doctors don't turn up, people will die. But if the junior doctors are not getting the support they need, people will die. So you have a case of people dying now because the junior doctors are not available, or people dying later because the junior doctors are not getting the support they need. They're not getting the wages they need. They're leaving. Many of them are leaving. Many of them are overworked and underpaid. They'll make mistakes. You know, I think the solution here is for the government to fix this problem, to meet with the junior doctors immediately to stop the strike action from taking place. To meet with them, to negotiate, you know, in good faith and resolve this. Because they're the only ones who can do that. But this playing chicken with the unions, we've seen it before. You know, if the immediate blame will be placed on the junior doctors. But why are these strikes taking place? Because the government are not providing the junior doctors with what they need. It's sad. It goes on to say, they added that patients would face an even greater risk of being harmed. Sorry, I read that. The trio of cardiac experts are senior doctors at the Royal Brompton and Huddersfield Specialist Heart and Lung Hospitals in London. Those facilities, plus the cardiac unit at St Thomas's Hospital in the capital, have between them postponed between 30 and 40 operations that were due to conduct next week on P2 patients whose fragile health means they need surgery within 28 days. It's a heavy situation. It's a difficult situation. Last month's 3-day strike by junior doctors in London over their demand for 35% pay rise led to 175 outpatient appointments and operations being cancelled. NHS bosses fear next week's 4-day stoppage, which starts at 7 a.m. on Tuesday, 11th of April, will force them to reschedule as many as 250,000 appointments. It's once again the government needs to meet with them and say, okay, we're not going to pay you 35%, but let's negotiate something close to that. But you know, these are doctors who haven't seen a pay rise in a long time, and you have a cost of living crisis which is driving them out, many of them out of their profession. Proper financing for the NHS would help that out. Yes, the government need to provide the NHS with the funding it needs, that it requires. I've said this before, when it comes to funding, journalists need to be asking MPs and ministers, do they have enough? When Rishi Sunak or the health secretary says, oh, we spent 500 million here, 500 million there, the question should be, is that enough? Because they have to say, yes, it is, then there will be no problems. But they never said, they would never ask that question because they would never answer that question. They can't say, no, it's not enough, because then why isn't it enough? How are you expecting the NHS to work with not enough money? That's what really we need. We need journalists who will ask that specific question: is it enough? You can apply it to the Department of Work and Pensions. We're giving this amount of money to help people get back into work. Is it enough? Or how much is it per capita? How much is it per person? So guys, we're almost at the end. I just wanted to cover one final story before we finish. Over a year ago, Russia invaded Ukraine, And one of the reasons was, well, there was a risk that Ukraine would join NATO. And Vladimir Putin's plan to drive a wedge between, NATO member states over Ukraine hasn't gone as well as planned. And it's now the case that Finland has joined NATO.
The NATO hymn will now be played.
Okay, we don't need the NATO hymn. So Finland has joined. Unfortunately, Finland's Prime Minister lost the election and there'll be a new government formed. But I think it's a big day for Finland, now being a member of NATO, the protection that NATO will extend to Finland. I'm pretty sure that Finland would have been able to deal with the Russians anyway. So the last time the Russians invaded Finland, it didn't go too well for them. So, but having NATO's backing is really important for that nation, and it's something that there was majority support for in Finland. Once again, Putin's plan to destroy NATO isn't exactly going very well. So guys, we're at the end of the stream for tonight. I want to say thank you to everyone who came on. Thanks for smashing the like button. Thanks to everyone who sent a super chat. Greatly appreciated. And thanks to the moderators who are doing a great job tonight. I'll be on the post-stream chat after the stream. So I want to say, if you want to jump on that, we'll have a chat about what went on today. Maybe whether Trump will eventually be put behind bars. So have a great week. I'll see you on Friday. Same bad time, same bad channel. As always, stay safe and good night. Wait a minute. I forgot. One for the road. How did I forget that? Enjoy this.
Is this your first wedding? Always have to check these days. Because you never know. It feels like quite a small stag do, so quite often that suggests second or third. First wedding, go to fucking Prague. Second stag do, let's go to a comedy club. Central London, then we can fuck off home. All right? So let's see whether it's a second wedding or just a bit cheap. Let's find out. How long have you been with your partner, James?
Just over a year.
Just over a year. Good. Well, it's open still. We've got still no idea. And this is the first wedding, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. And so, how did you guys meet? This is quite relatively quick. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it definitely.
Yeah. And how did you meet?
Online.
Online. Okay. Can I just check you have met them already? It begins to feel like a possible scam situation. Yeah, they're absolutely lovely, and we set up a date and everything. I've sent them all my money, and my friend said, "Should we do a stag do in London because you cannot afford the extra expensive Prague?" So, what do you do for a living, James? What's your job?
Financial crime analyst.
Financial crime analyst. Feels like someone might be testing you, James. You definitely met them physically in person. You definitely. What is the name of your fiancée?
Emma.
Emma. Okay, so Emma is a real person, not a mattress. We know that it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't like an advert that you misinterpreted. Oh, this sounds like an excellent deal. I would marry that mattress. Congratulations. Where is the big day? Where is it happening?
Just outside Millstone.
Just outside where, sorry? Maidstone. I thought it said Mexico for a second there. This definitely is a cartel.
Okay, guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. Take care. Good night.